and what a treat today. I'm so thrilled to introduce my guest, pianist, composer, arranger, and teacher, Isaac Raz. Isaac Raz holds a Bachelor of Music degree in Jazz Composition and Music Synthesis from the Berklee College of Music in Boston and is a recipient of the Duke Ellington Award. He received his Master of Arts in Teaching in Music Education from Lehman College, Bronx, New York, and is a recipient of the Joseph Delicari Fund Award. In 1993, he composed the musical score for the Emmy Award-winning documentary film Pioneer Woman. In 2000, Isaac worked with jazz record producer Teo Macero, playing keyboards and programming tracks for his Impressions of Miles Davis album featuring Vernon Reid, David Liebman, Lou Soloff, and Lincoln Goines. His arranging skills have been utilized in many pop music recordings, including Zomba Records' gold-selling R&B artist Joe. Isaac continues to work as a composer, creating music for film, TV, and educational applications. His jazz and pop groups have played throughout the country and abroad, featuring his own compositions as well as popular music of all styles. In the New York City jazz scene, Isaac is an 8-year veteran of Barry Harris's weekly Tuesday workshop and a great proponent of Barry Harris's method. He's the founder of Whole Music LLC and runs a fast-growing YouTube channel. Isaac, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so thrilled to be able to talk to you. I'm such a fan of Barry Harris, but I want to go right to the beginning. When did you start picking up music?
I believe when I was a very young child, my parents put me on the Suzuki method, and I started out, as a young child, and then I sort of quit, and then I started again when I was 9 because it drew me in, and the rest is history. Also, my mother is a singer, and she was a major figure in the Israeli musical theater world, having done productions of My Fair Lady for the first National Theater production, and so I kind of grew up around vocals and musical theater and music. My father was also a music teacher before he went into other careers, so it's always been around,
Do you have absolute or perfect pitch?
No, the jury's out for me. I know a lot of people might disagree with me, but about what is, how do people, I don't even know if that exists, or if it's either everybody has it or nobody has it. It's interesting. It's like, well, if you have perfect pitch, is it like the Baroque A, or is it the A 440? Which perfect pitch do you have? It's very interesting to contemplate that, but that's another discussion. But for me, it's like if you give me a note, I'll be able to hear the others very well. But and I don't know. Sometimes I get it right. I have a 1 out of 12 chance of getting it right, I guess.
Now, you have gone through Berklee College of Music, which is a very famous music college for contemporary music, jazz, and you have a degree in jazz composition. And then you studied at Lehman College to get a Master of Arts in Teaching for Music Education. And then, I guess 8 years ago, you wound up in the Barry Harris weekly Tuesday workshop. And so tell me about that. So what was your development like in Berklee and then Lehman College, and how did you eventually find your way into the Barry Harris classes?
Okay, so when I finished high school, I didn't really even apply to any other schools. It was like Berklee was the mecca, and I just kind of went there and sight unseen and decided, I'm going to jump in whole hog into the jazz world, and then this new method that they teach it at Berklee. And, and I did pretty well there. I mean, I really studied the system and I learned it, but I kind of always had trouble putting it together when playing. You know what I mean? I was more of a writing major and a production major, but if I was just sort of jamming along, I couldn't get my fingers to follow what was in my head. And I don't know if I was practicing it wrong, and I just kind of really always struggled with it a little bit.
And are you talking about like chord scales and modes?
I'm talking about all of it. I'm talking about playing. So like,
Yeah.
I'm talking about like when you would just sit down to play a tune, all my teachers would say, well, okay, well, which fifth do you use? Which do you use a flat fifth? Which 13th do you use a flat 13th or sharp, natural 13th? Which scale is this, a Lydian with a sharp 4 or a mixolydian with a sharp 4, or a mixolydian with a natural 4. There's all this terminology, and I understood it very well, and it was a great way of teaching theory and having an understanding of theory. But when it came to practical playing, I always struggled with being able to find a streamlined way of actually performing it. So fast forward about an inordinate amount of time, and I sort of accidentally landed in Barry's class, and then there was just something about the way he Barry kind of came up with his own system independently. He's not saddled with traditional instruction like some of us. So he is, and he's also blessed with a really amazing intellect to be able to take ideas and tie them together.
What was your first day like in that master class?
So when I first got there, it's kind of a little chaotic. Everybody's sort of crowding around the piano. It's a little like a press conference with everybody shoving their mics in everybody's face, and you're like, all right, let's catch this.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and at first I was a little off put by that, but thanks to my then girlfriend, now wife, who made me stay. I saw there was this. I kind of caught. I clued into what was really going on when I got over that initial shock. Being used to a more. You go to a classroom and there's a teacher, and then there are people sitting, and everybody's organized, and this was a little chaotic. But it's actually in the chaotic nature of it is what is the effectiveness of the teaching, I found, because it's very it's very organic. He comes up with ideas off the top of his head. And then what happens is, there's this interaction between, the master, who is Barry, and then his more advanced students. And then there's this sort of concentric circle going out for the students teaching other students, and everybody's and it's a little bit like those Renaissance paintings that you see of like Socrates and all
the
and
School of
everybody's
Athens,
arguing,
yeah.
and people have their fingers up in the air talking about, I'm discussing something important, and then the other and then there's the teacher who's in the center. That's a little bit how it's structured.
Well, do you remember how your first interaction with him directly?
Do I remember my first interaction with him? Yeah. It was almost nothing. I mean, after the piano class, there comes the vocal class, and I'm a singer as well, so and I'm pretty good at sight singing. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna be first. He'll pick a song that nobody knows. Like lately, he's been asking me. I've been privileged to be among the people that help him find music. So he says, Isaac, find this song. I apologize. And I'm looking all over, and that one happens to be in the TuneDex book. But sometimes he'll break the internet. Like, there's no way of finding this song. You have to. It's on YouTube, and you have to transcribe it. Anyway, long story short, there's this song that nobody ever knows, and I sight sing it, and I was technically rather good, but of course completely devoid of any soul or interpretation by his standards. And he just kind of like, yeah, that's nice, But that was it. And then you just got to keep coming. And then after, I'd say it took him 2 years to even remember my name.
What happened to that second year when he actually was aware that you were quite serious about this?
Well, it's you're one of many, and you kind of, it's a little bit like what I described about the press conference. You need to have good elbows to find your way to the hot seat if you want to. You really do need to be motivated, and then he'll see your motivation, and then he'll engage you on that. All he cares about is to pass the word, and if you're with him, he's with you. And if you're not, then he's nice and he's wonderful. But you could tell that he'll direct his attention, his true attention, to those who have invested a dedication into what he wants to teach.
Let's set the stage for my audience then. So Barry Harris is a very famous, in the jazz world, a jazz pianist, and he's known for being a part of just the recorded legacy is vast. He's on a lot of records, and I guess would it be fair to say that he is an adherent of kind of the bebop style of jazz?
Well, his nom de guerre is the keeper of the bebop flame. So he really has committed his artistic self and his teaching self to the bebop language. And once in confidence, he sort of, he is a bit of an iconoclast, and he does like to ruffle people's feathers, and he does it. It's almost tongue in cheek, but it's fun to see him do that, because a person in his position. But once in confidence, he kind of leaned over to me and he said, "Look, Isaac," he said, "I fell in love with a period, and it was too short." And it was. I mean, if you really want to think about it, you're talking, roughly 1945 to roughly 1958. Really, it depends on who you ask.
Does he include hard bop in there?
Well, I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of comes after. And you might think of him as that, but no, he basically looks at the language as developed by Bud and Bird, and but by my understanding, he feels that is what takes the mantle from what he calls Bach and them. Chopin and Liszt, and basically standard practice, high romantic harmonic language. And he says this is the language. This is the fully well-developed language, and it didn't really reach its potential before music sort of splintered off into a modernistic style, and also what he would call sort of what you might consider almost an academic, like it splintered off into like an academic conservatized type of practice, as opposed to the oral tradition the way he's keeping it. And so there's a bit of almost a lamenting of like what happened to the music, Sometimes he tells a story. He says, Beauty and Ugly went for a swim, and Ugly got out of the water before Beauty did and put on all Beauty's clothes. So then Beauty had no choice but to put on all Ugly's clothes. And that's what we have today. And you think about that story, it's kind of poignant, for somebody in his position. He's looking around, and it seems like the music changed around him, but he's still focused on trying to find the full potential of this language.
I've heard some criticism where it's like he is not modern. He's part of the 40s and 50s, but jazz has really gone forward. It's not, we don't think like that anymore. Now we're talking about chord scales and the super Locrian Mixolydian Ionian flat 3 or whatever. That's what we're talking about now. And so Barry is an anachronism in a way.
It's very easy to think that way, but what I learned, and having studied at Berklee in a way, and again, I don't want to knock it, because I really learned a lot of valuable stuff, and I studied under Herb Pomeroy, who's a phenomenal teacher of writing and of theory. But in a way, it was almost like doing the music in reverse chronological order, starting with the modernists and working your way back. Whereas what I found rather late in the game, having stumbled into Barry's class, is that you can't play the modern stuff without a firm grounding in the traditional. And actually, what I found out even after that is they're one and the same. There's no difference. When you say chord scales, chords come from scales, and that's what Barry teaches. It's all about linearity, and you want to dial the clock back to, that goes way back to the very origins of our Western music language. is that harmony evolved out of counterpoint, which is linear. And Barry teaches it exactly the same way, where a chord is just basically coming out of a scale. And so he'll teach harmony in a scalar way, and that's what makes the sound that's what makes it sound right. That correct sound is that linear movement. And then when you want to talk about modernism and the modern sounds and the kinds of harmonic colors that the modernists add, well, Barry's language is able to describe those kinds of things so elegantly, and you can come up with some modern sounds that you wouldn't even imagine. I mean, how do you get that sound? And really, it just comes out of that basic six-diminished scale or whatever it is that he's teaching, with no like you can sound like you're playing out, quote unquote, but you're not out. You're in, and that's amazing. That's Jedi stuff,
Yeah. Some people have uploaded videos on YouTube where he starts, I saw one really funny one where he said music is math, and Bud and Charlie Parker were great, but there's a whole lot more music for you guys to write.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Well, that's what I was saying about him lamenting music going into a different style before fully realizing the potential, of what you had mentioned as being old school. It's only old school because it went that far. You can take the principles and push them further and get modern with it. Mathematics evolves, and so this language evolves much in the same way. And there's no end to math. He says, there's no end to math. You can't do it all. Well, you think Bach did it all? He didn't do it all. There's no way he could do it all. That's where, that's where you really see his dedication to spreading the word, and to being a bit of an evangelist for the style.
Isaac, let's get technical now. Okay, so
let's get technical. Let's get wonky.
Let's get wonky, because if we split up his class, there's a vocal class, there's a piano class, and there's a horn class, right? Is that right?
Well, more like an improv class.
So let's start with improv, maybe. If we wanted to get comfortable in his class, and you're a veteran of it, what are the things we need to practice and get ready?
Well, I'll just put it in his words. He says, this is finishing school. You need to come here knowing certain things, so you need to know all of your major scales from every scale degree, up and down. You need to know that, first of all, it has to fit in rhythm. So that implies two things. Number one, you have to pat your foot, and never pat your foot on 2 and 4. Always pat your foot on 1 and 3, or on all 4 beats if it's medium tempo. So, and he actually likes to criticize people that tap on 2 and 4. Now, I was taught to tap on 2 and 4.
I think we all were, right?
Right. On 2, 3, 4, 1. And I always would get lost. And when Barry said tap on 1 and 3, 2 and 4 is in the heart. And so then you've got the real feel, because it's doont, 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 doont. Now it's funky, and now there's a beat to it. He says, it's funny when again, he's a bit of an iconoclast and he likes to ruffle feathers. He says, I can't even, if you're tapping on 2 and 4, what in the world are you clapping on? I can't even do it. He's trying to clap. I can't do it. Yeah, you tap on 1 and 3, and then you never get lost if you remember to do it. If you were taught wrong, like I was, I'll forget sometimes, and I'll go back the other way, and then I'll get lost. I'll drop beats. I'll lose the timing. It's embarrassing. But if I tap on 1 and 3, especially with fast, he calls it, when you do fast tempos, he calls it the slow underneath. So you might be playing Cherokee, do, 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 but you're tapping boom, 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 boom. You're tapping 1 and 3, and you will never get lost. I mean, you might miss a change, but you'll always land on your feet, because you're grounded in the rhythm. And this is, of course, deeply human. Ever since we were cave people, the low sounds were the feet and the high sounds were the hands. You tap and you clap, and there's an action, reaction, and that describes all of the forward motion of musical
Well, that's brilliant.
rhythm.
You brought up You brought up Cherokee. Now, if we were in Berklee, they would say, okay, B flat major, Ionian scale, and then Mixolydian. They would throw in all the modes, right? Immediately to think. But how should we break up that song?
Okay, so the way he teaches the improv class, he has this real great method of his that you could refer to as a scale outline. And what it basically means is you tap on 1 and 3, you play a scale to the 7th degree, not to the 8th degree. Because when you go, if you go da 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 da, it doesn't sound right in the rhythm. But if you go da 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 da
I can actually hear Cherokee's chord progression underneath.
That's what it is. So you're developing your ears, and then when you practice the scales in their place in the song like that, you now see where the roots are, where the chord tones are, where the passing tones are so clearly and instantaneously, and again, very importantly, in rhythm. Because how is jazz different from the standard practice classical European music or romantic? There's a rhythm section. And once you get that rhythm train going, it's like a freight train. It doesn't stop. It just goes. And you have to deal with it. So how do you do that? Well, you make sure you're grounded by tapping, and then you practice the scales in their place. And then what happens is you start to see the connections. You don't even know it cognitively, but somehow, even if you can get through one scale outline once on a song that you're having trouble improvising on, you'll be able to just improvise much better. And then there are other ways of permutating that.
Wait, let's take a quick step. So you said all the major scales, all the minor scales. So what?
You need to know all your major scales
from
every scale degree. Okay. Well, there's your minors, right?
Is minor natural minor or harmonic or melodic, jazz melodic? What would it be?
Yes. All three. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, because think about what the minor, the melodic and harmonic minor are modifications to make the minor scale fit a tonal context, to add the major seventh, the leading tone. And it works on the way up, but it doesn't work on the way down. And you can just look at the well-timbered clavier and see how Bach did it and see how those cross relations work. What I do personally is I'll practice. I'll take from every scale degree. So I'll go, and then when you get to the 6, you got the natural minor. But then I might do the harmonic minor on all of them. So I might go da 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 dee. Da da bo do dee do dee da 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 dee da da. I can't do it, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly.
Right?
So 3 minor scales, but then again, there's also his minor 6 and major 6 diminished scales. What is that?
That's right. Well, that's a whole thing that goes more to the theory class, right? But again, everything is grounded in the theory class because that's the basic framework for the entire language. What you'll see in the improv class, just to finish the thought on that, is that he has his half-step rules of where you put half-steps in. Once you get the scale outline done, there are ways of breaking up a scale to make an interesting line. And you'll use arpeggios, you'll use chords, you'll use...
Is that the bebop scale?
Well, the six-diminished scale is what people call the major bop scale, which is a major scale with a half step between the 5th and the 6th. And you can think of it many different ways. I mean, even Chopin used that. Barry will show in class how he'll use it in an etude, Chopin etude, particular Chopin etude that uses that particular scale. And even Bach used it. They all used it because if you want to think about that raised 5th degree in the major scale, that's equivalent to the leading tone in the relative minor. Right. So let's say if you're in the key of C and you're going C, D, E, F, G, G sharp, A, B, C, the G sharp is the 7th of A minor. So you can think of that as the relative minor with the harmonic minor in it. So if you want to think about that relationship, that's kind of built into the bop scale. Now, he doesn't call it a bop scale because it doesn't tell you anything about the origin of it. The origin of it is from a 6 chord and a diminished chord, a C6, C, E, G, and A, and a diminished chord, D, F. You said we were getting technical, right?
We are. We have to be.
Okay, good. So the D, F, A flat, and B, right? So when you put those two scales together, you end up with that 8-note scale, C, D, E, F, G, A flat or G sharp, A, B, and C, and that's what people call the major bop scale. The problem is, though, it doesn't apply to different things. So actually what ends up happening is he builds it, and this, again, this goes to other concepts of his, like he has this way of looking at diminished scales, how everything comes from diminished. And I call it the diminished genealogy. That's my name for it. But he'll say so-and-so, like so-and-so begat so-and-so who begat so-and-so. So this is how he came up with these diminished scales. And we'll talk about that. But just to answer your question, he's got 4 different scales based on 4 different chords. The major 6, the minor 6, the dominant 7th, and the dominant 7th with a flat 5. Each one of them shares the same diminished note.
Is that used as a scale outline, or is that used more for theory and harmony?
That's used for theory and harmony. The scale outline, you can use those scales, but what he uses in improv class is a different language of how to build lines and how to improvise interesting lines. And then what he'll do is he'll take the natural scale and then he'll throw half steps in. He has his half step rules. So based on, if you start your line on the root, 3rd, 5th, or 7th, there's a specific set of rules of how many half steps fit in the line and where to put those half steps. And then there's a rule for the 2nd, 4th, and 6th. And then there's a rule for the major, there's a rule for the dominant, and a rule for the minor.
Now, you said he breaks it up with arpeggios and chords and...
Right, because you don't just play scales, you play interesting lines, interesting shapes.
How much material are we talking about here in terms of line building?
Well, this is actually goes back to your other question about the difference in the approach in teaching in a school such as, in a conservatory such as Berklee or New School or whatever, as opposed to Barry's method. Barry takes a very holistic view of it. So you could say he is like the Einstein of bebop. If Einstein narrowed down gravity and time and space into one simple principle, right, which he called relativity, right? Now, I'm not a physicist. I'm definitely out of my league, but it's a sensibility of being able to narrow things down to their essence and to come up with a simple principle that then applies to endless possibilities. Well, he did that with bebop. So when you come to Barry's class and when you read, material published by Barry aficionados, or when you talk to people who understand Barry's method, or you keep showing up to class, it's a little bit like fishing, like you show up to the pond. You might catch a big fish one day, or you might not catch any fish the next day. And some days you'll catch a fish and you'll feed your family for a month. But you got to keep showing up to the pond. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the way class is structured. But if you keep showing up, what ends up happening is eventually the picture sort of crystallizes into, it boils down to really a handful of principles, under 10. I'm going to say, I can't really name exactly how many, because then every time I think of one, I'll think of another one. But it's definitely under 10.
Let's hear him.
Principles. So you've got the whole scalar chords idea, or scalar chords, where you would, and I guess that would intersect with partimento study, where like a
partimento.
7/6. That's right. We talked about this. Well, this is new to me now. I'm just starting to see this.
Okay,
now,
but let's
really
leave partimento to the later part of the conversation. Let's get back to Barry for now.
Well, he does this 7/6 suspension, he'll call a scale of chords with movement, and then he'll add different embellishments to it, to half-step embellishments to it, and he'll do it in different ways, and then there's that whole thing, scale of chords. Then you've got the whole six-diminished idea, where you integrate a diminished chord into a 6 chord, and then you end up with those 4 8-note scales, the major 6, minor 6, dominant 7, and dominant 7 flat 5 diminished. And everything associated with that. So different ways of voicing it, drop 2, drop 3, drop 2 and 4, 3-note voicings, how to borrow notes from diminished. And there's a whole subset of things. So that's another principle. Another principle would be what you would call the major chromatic. Now, the thing is, the way I like to teach it to my students is you got this map of this country, Barry Harristan, okay? And then there are different cities in Barry Harristan. And there are highways connecting all of these cities. Everyone connects to, so the citizens of, of Scale of Chords Town can go visit Drop Two-ville, and Drop Two-ville can go to, the six-diminished chordville. You know what I mean? And then there's the 6-chord rules. There's the half-step rules.
Yeah. It does remind me a lot. You mentioned partimento. It really is a lot like partimento, because in partimento there's so many things to kind of put together to get together.
Well, it's a construction kit. It's like chess moves that come together. It's Legos, it's playing with blocks. And that's what it is. Music is a language. So you learn the elements of the language, and you learn how to piece them together in more and more creative ways. And that's what's so engaging about it, is that it's not this sort of rote learning method. It's more of an exploration and a building.
Well, you said that Barry codified this language. Now, are you able to listen to the Bud and Dizzy and Charlie Parker recordings and actually break them down systematically?
Well, I'm not as big of a scholar in the repertoire as some of other Barry's disciples are, although I'm working on it. Maybe a little late in the game, but I can definitely hear where Barry stole his stuff from. Like I was like, oh, when you listen to this recording of Bud Powell, and then you hear some move that he did, and you can say, oh, well, that's what he took when he did that. But what Barry would do is he would take that move that Bud did, and he would develop it further and do his own thing with it. That's the key. And he even says this in class. He says, now you take this idea, now you have to do something with it.
That was a criticism that people who are not familiar with Barry, they'll say, he's a Bud Powell clone.
No, he's not a clone. He uses the mechanics of the language that Bud Powell, I think everybody can agree that between Bud and Bird and Dizzy, they invented the language of bebop, right? And John Lewis, and there's others, obviously, right? But Barry focused in on Bud and Bird, and he took their ideas and he made them their own, and he started to develop on them. So it's like a scholar following another scholar. That's all it is. If you're going to criticize that, then you criticize
Beethoven and Mozart, right?
Right. Exactly. Criticize any physician that builds on the work of a previous physician.
Right. Okay, so now what is this thing about 4 dominant scales that are related? So like there's a diminished, but out of that you can have 4 dominants. Is that right?
Okay. So, all right. So you want to get into the diminished genealogy town.
Yes.
In the country of Barry Harriston. Right. So let's take a travel down to diminished genealogy town. So the way he tells it, it's a beautiful story. It's almost biblical. He says, okay, so first there was 12, right? That's the chromatic scale. And that's God. That's the 12 zodiac signs. That's the 12 disciples. That's everything is 12, right? And then God made man and woman, right? So you had 2. And what are the 2? It's the 2 whole tone scales. From C to B, you have 2 whole tone scales, right? And then the 2, what do man and woman do when they get together? And then somebody in class will say, they argue. And then after they argue, they get together and they make babies, right? And then, so they made 3 babies, and those are the 3 diminished 7th chords. So there are 3 of them between C and B and the 12 tones of the 12-tone scale. So, and then he'll do a thing where he'll show, well, I can turn any whole tone scale into any diminished chord. And he'll give you an example of how he can do a nice progression, a 2-5-1 progression in a song, and he'll create a sequence from it. And he'll hold down the whole 6 tones of a whole tone scale and go to a diminished, which itself can be a dominant, like a dominant with a flat 9, and move to another chord. And it's just a beautiful sound. So he says, so like they're all related. So any whole tone can go to any of the 3 diminisheds linearly. So that's the next level.
In terms of improvisation you're talking about.
Harmony more now, but actually improvisation includes harmony as well as melody. So you could do this melodically as well. It really is, again, a principle. It's an operating principle. So you can apply it to any musical situation as needed.
When you have the diminished chords, and I know that if you alter each one of the notes, you could get a dominant chord. Now, how do those dominant...
Well, that's the next level.
Okay, go ahead.
That's exactly the next level. So he says, so now you got your three diminished, and he'll say, Schoenberg said, if I move this one note down, I get a dominant, and then I can move each one, and I get a dominant. But then Barry's like, well, what if I move it up? What happens if I take a C sharp diminished, for example, C sharp, E, G, and B flat, and I move the C sharp up? What do I get? I get D, E, G, and B flat. Well, isn't that a G minor 6? So he says, if I move one down, I get dominant 7, right? But if I move it up, I get a minor 6 chord. All right? Okay. Well, what if I move 2 consecutive chord tones down? It's okay. Let me look at that C sharp diminished. C sharp and the E moves down to a C and an E flat. I end up with C, E flat, G, B flat. Wait a minute. Isn't that an E flat 6, major 6? Well, by golly, it is. So if I move 2, now I get a major 6 chord. What happens if I move them up? Well, okay. So the C sharp becomes a D and the E becomes a F. Wait, it's a B flat 6. So wait a minute, if I move them down, I get 1 6 chord, and if I move them up, I get a 6 chord that's a fifth away. See, this is how his mind works. He's just so brilliant that way. He's able to really get in because he's not handcuffed by traditional teaching. He's free to sit there and figure this stuff out. So he says, what happened? We had 2 diminished chords, right? We were using 2 different diminished chords because we're moving it by half steps. So by definition, we're using 2 different diminished chords, right? So the dominant 7, it uses 1 note from one diminished and 3 from another. The minor 6 uses 1 and 3 from another. The major 6 uses 2 from one and 2 from the other. He says, what if I move 2 non-consecutive ones? What if I move the C sharp and the G? Well, I end up with a C dominant 7 with a flat 5. So in other words, I was able to construct a major 6, a minor 6, a dominant 7, and a dominant 7 flat 5, all from moving chord tones from one diminished scale, which is equivalent to using one diminished chord, which is equivalent to using 2 diminished chords, right? Well, there are 3 diminished chords, right? Where's the third one? Well, the third one is the one you move through. The third one is where the scale tones come from. And that's how he came up with that. It's brilliant.
You have these chords that come out of the diminished chord by a little bit of alteration. So what does that mean practically? How would you use them now?
So then they are now the origin of these 4 scales. So like the 6 diminished, the 7, the 6 diminished, the minor 6 diminished, the 7 diminished, and the 7 flat 5 diminished, because the 6 chord comes from 2 out of the 3 diminished scales, and the diminished that's attached to that is the third diminished. So if you take a C6 and you say a C6 is C, E, G, and A, right? The C and the A come from a C diminished chord, and the E and the G come from a C sharp diminished chord. Where's the D diminished? Well, that's the diminished that you move through. And you end up with C, D, E, F, G, G sharp, A, B, and C. And that's how that came into being. And that's the origin story, if you will, of those 4 scales. Now, when you think about the bebop scale, as it were, when they say a dominant bebop scale, they'll go, it's da na 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 na, which is C, B, B flat, A, G, so and so on. Where you put a half step, that's not the way the 7 diminished scale works. It's a different scale. If you think about the 7 diminished scale, nobody teaches this. It's like it's a C7 and a D diminished, right? So a C7 is C, E, G, and B flat. A D diminished is D, F, A flat, and B. So when you put them together, you get a scale that's C, D, E, F, G, A flat, B, C. It's a great scale, but it's not what you would call the bop scale, the dominant bop scale. In Barry's world, the dominant bop scale is a dominant scale with the half step between the root and the seventh. It says that goes to the half step rules. That's another town in Barry Harristan. Right?
Okay, wait, Isaac, I got to stop you here. So now we're in harmony central. We're in harmony central, right? We're talking about chords and comping.
We're harmony central.
Okay, so let's say you have 2 bars of a dominant chord. Is that where you throw in the dominant diminished scale of chords?
You might. That's one option. You might. I would probably use it in a chording, like an comping. Like I might throw that. Let's say I've got a C7 for 2 measures. I might throw the C7 to the D diminished to the inversion of the C7, and I'll get this da da da, this nice movement sound while I'm comping. I might use that scale. What I'm probably more apt to do is to use the half step rules when I'm coming up with lines on it, because there are different ways of adding half steps at judicious points to create interesting lines while you're improvising. And again, that's melody central, I guess, which is related but different.
So, okay, you have these let's say somebody's really practiced these 4 scale of chords and as many keys as they can. How do you use them now?
Well, you use them in chording. Like there's so many ways of using them. Once you see, it boils down harmony as a whole into tonic and dominant areas, and then you see it as one unit with 2 sides, like a yin and yang thing. Okay, and when you're in a playing situation, you see that whole framework. So then the minutia of what chord leads to what, or which chord tone leads to what, isn't as important. You're just going to say, I'm going to use some notes from the diminished and I'm going to use some notes from the chord tones, and borrow them and put them together and mix them and match them in different ways. That's how you look at it, really much more holistically than an approach that we were describing earlier from these schools that shall not be named, where you're like, which chord tone to use or which tension do you use? And you're going one by one. Instead of going one by one, now you see the whole framework, and it's right there in front of you, and you just move the pieces around like on a checkerboard.
Can we take an example? So like Cherokee, for instance. Let's slow it down. So yeah. I know it's a very fast tune, but...
It's actually really nice as a ballad.
Yeah. So is this a B flat or a B flat major 7? How would you comp that?
Right. Well, so now we're getting a little bit into another town in Harmony Central. Let's call it one of the suburbs of Harmony Central in Barry Harriston, and that's his 6-chord rules, which I was going to post. That was going to be my next video, but then
your YouTube channel, I'm such a fan of it.
You all 2 videos of it.
It's like a distillation of the knowledge from those workshops. It's fantastic. I really encourage people to subscribe to that.
One by one.
Okay, so we're now in the suburb of Harmonyville. So what's happening?
Yeah.
6 chords.
So that's his 6-chord rules. He's got 8 ways of throwing a 6-chord on top of another chord tone. So I might play an F6 on that B flat major, because the F6 gives me F, A, C, and D. F is the 5th of B flat, A is the major 7th, C is the 9th, and D is the 3rd. And that gives you a really beautiful sound. But here's the kicker. I can use the diminished of F, right? And I can use the diminished of F. So think about using that in a B flat major and what kind of cool sounds you can get, right? Because they resolve themselves linearly into F. And this is the power of this stuff. You would never say in that other framework, I'm going to play an F major 7 with a 9, but then I'm going to throw in a B flat major 7 with a 9. But then how do you explain a C sharp? Well, guess what, man? It sounds awesome. And there's your modernism. When you can take a C sharp and you can make you can actually make a A triad with that on top of a B flat major and resolve the A triad to a D minor. And now there's your Herbie, there's your McCoy, there's your Chick, all right? Right there in that six-diminished scale. But you've used a six-chord rule. You know what I'm saying? It's right there. All the modernism is woven into it. You just got to know how to find it.
So you can pretty much handle any chord situation by thinking of them in 6 chords, and then also these 4 chord scales. Would you say that's also for accompaniment, or for you're making your own solo composition? It's for basically harmony in general.
All of it. That's right. It's a framework. It's an operating principle, and it's E equals MC squared of jazz. Okay, now I'm going to put you on the hot seat, and you don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable. I want to you've been in those classes for a long time. I'm sure he must have dropped a lot of comments about players, about things and that here and there. He must have dropped a little something here and there. I would really like to know what he thought about the Sonny Clarks, the Bobby Timmons, the hard bop pianists that came after the Bud Powell and that kind of thing. Well, when he starts talking about that stuff, that's when I check my phone. So I don't really hear a lot of it. No, so here's the thing. I mean, I actually was very lucky to be in the audience when Barry Harris and Cedar Walton did a double piano trio concert. And it was just so cool to watch their interactions. I mean, the bottom line is, even though he does like to throw things out there, but I think that really, in truth, it's all in good spirit of collegiality, and he just believes in it. He just believes in the bebop language being the most elegant representation of the music. And he advocates for that.
You know what is funny? I've only been there once. It was last December. I loved it. And I saw you there, but we weren't friends yet. But I remember there was one moment. I remember. I would remember when there was one moment. He turned around and gave a really ugly look at some guy with his keyboard. And then then a second later, he turned back and gave him a little wink and a smile to tell him it was all a joke.
That's right.
It was
exactly right. He loves to do that. He is a master. Like, I've never really actually seen this before because of the circles that I grew up in and traveled in. But when I finally came to Barry, I got an exposure of really what it is, because he is a master of the old school jive. He is a master of it, and it's a lot of fun.
Can you comment on his big band writing? And he's doing now big pieces, right? Big projects. So can you talk about, I think you're running some rehearsals for him as well?
Well, he asks me to help teach parts to the chorus or conduct them when be one of the people that does it, because he does have a wide circle of people that helps him out with that. Well, the big band thing is kind of amazing. He, 50 years ago, we're talking, a long time ago, he just sat down without a lick of formal training in arranging or orchestration. And he sat down and he wrote these arrangements for big band, strings, and chorus of his originals and of standards. And they were basically just sitting in his closet there. And I was there actually one day. We're playing Scrabble. And he says, "Isaac, looky here. Go into that closet." He had just come off of a back injury, which is another thing about him. Here's a man. He's 88 years old. Now he's 89 years old. He's turning 90 in December. And the man slips and falls, fractures 2 vertebrae. And he makes Rocky look like a sissy. I mean, he came out of that, man. And he walks up the stairs in a house. He lives in Nika's house, And anyway, look here. He couldn't move. So he's having me go, look here, get that. And in this closet are piles of sheet music that have been sitting there, since I was, in grade school.
So he's been writing all this music?
Well, he did for a while, and he has this whole thing. And so Michael Weiss and other people have been helping him put the, some of his longtime disciples and colleagues have been helping him put together this repertoire. And he just decided one day, he says, I want to hear my music. That was it. So he goes and he rents out an orchestral rehearsal studio, which is not cheap, and calling all musicians, play my music. And lo and behold, there they are. And so now I have to work, and I couldn't make it. But when I finally made it there and I heard these things played, my jaw was like hit the floor, because it's like what you hear. I guess the word that comes to mind is authentic, and like I said, I studied jazz comp, and I studied with Herb and all these great teachers, and I get this whole writing thing, or thought I did. And when you see Barry, and again, what drove him was pure obstinance. I hear this stuff, I'm writing it down, I don't care what you think. Sheer obstinance. And it's amazing. It's amazing. It's so beautiful. And right.
Correct.
It's his mother tongue. It's his mother tongue. And you hear it. It's the authenticity in every measure. It's remarkable. And another when I was in Italy with him, I went to Italy to the Italy workshop, which is another thing I really recommend anybody listening to make the pilgrimage. The energy, you get 20 plus countries, people from 20 plus countries coming in there, really getting into it. The energy is so palpable. And one of his teachers that lives in Switzerland now, Fitz Benedetti, who's phenomenal pianist and teacher, he said it best. He said, there is no substitution for direct exposure. And that's it. He is it. He is the real deal, and there's really no describing the ancillary benefits that you get just from being in the room and seeing him do his jive thing. And you know what I mean?
I want to ask you one final question before we end off, which is, if somebody wants to get good at jazz, there's so many methods, there's so many people teaching different styles and different things online. You've gone through Berklee, you've studied with Barry, you've done a master's of education. How should someone who's just brand new to this really approach jazz, and what's the right attitude to take to this?
Okay, so that's an excellent question, because again, there's kind of two schools of thought here. There's the academic school of thought, where you would go to a school and you would learn all the theory and everything. But I think that one is better served by learning it how it's meant to be learned, I think, which is as an oral tradition. Seek out mentors whose playing you like, either electronically on YouTube or in person, which is best, and learn from them. And learning from them means sometimes just hanging out and playing Scrabble. I mean, music is a language, so it has to say stuff, and that stuff is basic humanity. And that's how you're going to get depth and breadth into your artistic expression. And now the technical stuff, you need to know the technical stuff. You need to know all your scales. You need to know what a dominant is. You need to know what, but that's not rocket science. That's simple stuff. You can find basic theory everywhere. But seek out your mentors. Go to them. Transcribe their solos, or transcribe 4 measures of their solos, of the part that you like. Take it through the keys. That's how you're going to get good. When you go to study a language, you study the language, right? You study how to conjugate verbs, and you study what nouns are, and you build a larger and larger vocabulary. But how do you learn to speak the language? You go to the country. You listen to other people speaking it correctly. That's how you learn to speak a language. So I would say the same way, approach learning jazz the same way.
Wonderful. Well, the great Isaac Raz, subscribe to his YouTube channel. Check him out, Whole Music LLC. He's going to have a lot more videos, and I would love for you to come back on again, because we did touch on Barry, but I feel like it's such a vast ocean of material there that
it really is.
that I don't think
we just scratched the surface. I could go on. I had a great time. I really enjoyed it.
I don't think 1 hour is enough, Isaac, and I'm a fan of your playing, and I think really. I mean, if I'm just being honest, there are a lot of people who teach on YouTube, and I don't know, and just my opinion, I don't agree with a lot of what they say, and I think you really know your stuff very well.
Well, you're very kind, and I really appreciate your endorsement and your. We teach each other. I learn a lot from you.
And by the way,
so,
quick comment before you go on what you think of partimento, which you mentioned you just learned about.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's go back to the physics analogy, right? So I thought I discovered the atom, and I'm like, yeah, this is so cool, because that was the research that I did. But then I realized there are quarks, and you're like, wow, it doesn't stop there. There's a subatomic particle that makes everything work, and then maybe there are strings that make these quarks work. Well, partimento is that. That's partimento. Partimento is like the string theory of music, and it just makes the hairs on the back of my head, on my neck, stand up to think. When I'm reading through the Fenaroli book, it's one thing when you're studying a Bach piece from the Well-Tempered Clavier, right? And you're having a conversation with this man. And he's showing you, this is so cool, and you're like, yeah, but it's a one-way conversation because it's a written piece. When I'm reading through Fenaroli or Furno or Durante or any of those, and their partimenti are written as teaching pieces, so you see the same situation come up in different permutations, and there's sort of an unspoken, okay, Padawan, here's how you do it in here, and here's how you do it here. It's like and you're having a conversation with a man who lived 250 years ago. That just gives me goosebumps.
Just to tie this to Barry Harris, we know a mutually brilliant little girl who went to his workshop, and Barry was quite impressed by this partimento business, right?
Yes. And there is definitely, this is what's so sort of creepy and amazing about it, is that it's the way Barry teaches it is exactly the way these partimento, apparently, based on what I've read, and I guess you would know too, having had on your show some of the giants of the field, that this is how they taught it in the conservatories of Naples in the early to mid 17th century,
and eventually exported to everywhere.
18th century, early to mid 18th century, and exported it to everywhere, right? And then there was that whole Napoleon thing, and I'm just learning about this. But when you look at this idea of teaching musical language in terms of schema and in terms of building blocks, and learning these schema by building core concepts such as the rule of the octave, which you could think of the scale of chords, Barry's style, being the rule of the octave. And you can think of the six-diminished scale as being, one of the standard schema. Again, I'm not fluent enough in the language yet to be able to make these comparisons, but that's where I'm starting to really direct my attention, is how to find the bridge between 1750 and 1950.
And you know what? You would be a perfect guy to look at that, because you really know the Barry Harris stuff so well, and you, with your eyes looking at partimento, it would be really wonderful to see the parallels.
Well, stay tuned.
The great Isaac Raz. Subscribe to his channel. He's a wonderful teacher, great musician. Isaac, I hope you had a great time on the show. I'll talk to you soon.
I did. I had a blast. Thank you. Thank you, Nikhil.